I haven't really talked about this online, though my wife, then girlfriend, loves to share this story with anyone who will listen. Years ago, when we first met, my wife and I shared a love of photography and exploration. We called it ghost hunting, but it was more akin to visiting abandoned locations and taking photographs. I used a 35mm camera with Ilford HP5 Plus film, and she used a Canon Rebel digital camera. We would often scout locations online with plans to visit them and get some pics for our library. This time it was an old abandoned fuel refinery / storage depot just off of a beach overlooking Lake Ontario. It would be tricky getting into the old refinery itself from the front, and so I used Google Maps to see if there was any other way that we could get in. It looked like a wall was blocking most of our way in, except for a small section just off the beach that had only a chain link fence. The beach itself looked extremely disheveled, like it had seen little use, so we hoped this would give us the privacy we needed to sneak in. I mean, sneaking into an abandoned industrial structure isn't exactly legal, and we didn't want anyone calling the cops on us, so we packed our gear and headed out on our excursion. We had a hard time finding the entrance to the beach parking lot, but found it was blocked only by a loose chain that was laying on the ground, half buried in the dirt, as if someone had removed it long ago and just left it there. As we pulled into the parking area, there were no cars except for ours, which we noticed immediately. As we pull in and I park, my wife points and says, "There's people here." I look up and see several dozen people, all along the shoreline, and all staring out at the water at literally nothing. No ships, no planes, no boats of any kind. They're all just staring blankly. There was nothing particularly interesting about these people. They were all different age groups, from young adults to elderly, though there were no children, and all were dressed as you would expect people to dress. It was a warm, sunny day, and though some were in shorts, I found it odd that others were in long pants with jackets. It was far too warm for a jacket. What really struck me, though, was the confusion of how they got there. No cars, no bikes, nothing. And no place to park up on the street for at least a few kilometers. No houses nearby either, so locals? Maybe, but from where? Anyway, they're pretty much ignoring us as we sit in the car, contemplating whether to call the whole thing off, partially because of our need for privacy and partly because of how weird it was feeling. After a few minutes of deliberation, we decided to continue on with the plan, thinking that whatever they're doing, they're not interested in us. So we get out of the car, grabbing the cameras. No sooner do we close and lock our doors than every head turns and looks at us. I mean, every one of them. And there's a couple dozen of them, still facing the water, but their heads have turned to look in our direction. We froze for a second, looked at each other just completely weirded out. It felt like a long time, but was probably only a minute or so, when they all just turned back to face the water, ignoring us again. At this point, we got together and, in whispers, were discussing what to do. All the while, we were watching these people who completely ignored us. Finally, after some back and forth, we decided to press on. However, we'd been to some far sketchier places in the past, though this was a new one. We walked along the beach to the section of the wall where the fence was, and found a gap to enter. This is when I noticed they were looking at us again. Every one of them. We paused and hesitated to enter. After a few minutes, they again turned away. So, trying to be sneaky, we ducked behind the wall to the fence. From where we were, I couldn't see all of them, but the half dozen or so that I did see had turned their heads toward us. Not moving their bodies, just their heads. It just seemed that every time we moved, that's when they would look at us. We were committed and decided to get in, take our picks quickly, and then get out. The time we spent in the refinery couldn't have been longer than 15 minutes. We'd planned for an hour or more originally, but the strangeness being what it was, we knew this had to be a short one. As we climbed back through the gap in the fence, the first thing that caught me was that there was nobody in sight. I stopped my wife and told her this as we hesitated before passing the wall. We looked out slowly, trying to not call attention to ourselves. As we passed the wall, the entire place was in view. Not a freaking person there. Nobody. Even stranger, it looked like nobody had ever even been there, at least for a long time. Now, I didn't make any close inspection of the area, but the sand looked undisturbed. There were footprints, but not enough for several dozen people, and they didn't look new. You know how a beach's sand can look dry on the surface, but if you kick into it, darker wet sand underneath shows? There was none of that. Just a few small dunes of dry-blown sand. It was eerie as hell. The only noise were the distant cars on the road. After this, we hurried back to our car. Not running really, but definitely not taking time to enjoy a day at the beach. Not that there was much to enjoy there. We will never forget that place, and how truly freaky it was. I've been putting off writing this for a while now, but I finally have a chance to gather my thoughts. So, here it goes. I, 32-year-old female, have experienced sleep paralysis almost as far back as I can remember, with the earliest occurrence happening when I was about 8 years old. I had a dream where I was running around outside of my front yard, and I lay down on the rail of our porch to catch my breath. It was a concrete porch, sturdy enough for people to sit on and just wide enough for me to lay on. In my dream, I closed my eyes, and after a few seconds, I heard my grandpa calling for me to come inside. When I tried to get up, I just couldn't. I couldn't open my eyes, I couldn't move, and that's when the panic started to set in. I tried to scream for help, but of course I couldn't do that either. I finally snapped out of it and woke up in my bed, with my heart beating out of my chest. That would be terrifying for anyone, let alone an 8-year-old girl. Little did I know that this was the first of many of these experiences. I want to say it happens randomly, and somewhat sporadically. I can go weeks or months without an episode, and then out of nowhere it'll start up again, once or twice a week, or even 2 or 3 times in one night. However, I have noticed that it tends to happen more often when I'm under a lot of stress. It happened a lot in high school, about once a week, and again when I started working 2 jobs. It's happened so much that I've grown somewhat accustomed to it, and for the most part I can calm myself down by counting down from 10, or praying when it gets too overwhelming, which is kind of ironic or hypocritical, because I'm agnostic and borderline atheist, but I digress. The best solution I've found is to just have someone else wake me up, but when I tell whomever it is that's sleeping in the same room as me to do so, I met with the old wives' tale that you should never wake a sleepwalker. I have to explain to them that I don't sleepwalk. I don't even move. I can't move. And it's terrifying. It's hard to describe the feeling to someone who has never been through it, though I don't wish it upon anyone. Let me clarify that there are a couple different types of sleep paralysis that I myself experience. Not sure if this is common with others, but here's what happens to me. The first one is just your run-of-the-mill sleep paralysis where I can't move, speak, and it's sometimes hard to breathe. It's not always a nightmare or a regular dream. Sometimes I'm just coming out of sleep and realize that I'm awake, but my body does not respond. I usually panic for a bit, and then start counting and trying to control my breathing. If that doesn't work, then I panic again and start trying to scream for help until someone nudges me, or I just wait it out until I come to. I shared a room for a while, and my roommate would hear my muffled cries for help, but because I couldn't fully open my mouth, it would sound like a breathy, "Help." They'd usually just gently nudge me awake and I would be fine. I live with my fiancé now, and at first he too was a bit skeptical when I told him about it, but about a month after he moved in, he saw it firsthand. He's a pretty heavy sleeper, but now he knows to wake me if he happens to hear me struggling. The second type is the one that I hate the most: sleep paralysis hallucinations. This has, thankfully, only happened a handful of times, but it's 10 times more scary. It's often referred to as the sleep paralysis demon because people tend to see or feel a dark presence during an episode. It feels like someone or something is pinning me down, and I can't breathe. Other times I can hear multiple voices in the distance. I can't always make out what is said because they're all talking at once, but they tend to sound angry or distressed. Sometimes, those auditory hallucinations seem to be real conversation that people are having. It's kind of like I'm astral projecting, but instead of going to a place, I'm hearing it. Sometimes it's a mixture of both the pinning and the voices, which is the absolute worst. I don't have a history of mental health disorders in my family, and I do not hear these voices when I'm awake. But this is why I'm writing to you, Raven, because when this happens, it doesn't feel like a dream. It feels terrifyingly real. I want to share my scariest experience to see if your listeners can confirm whether it is just a bad dream or something else. One evening, I was visiting my mom after work. I had worked a 10-hour shift and was pretty tired, so I decided to take a nap in my old room. This room has a door that leads to the side of the house. If you follow the house all the way down, you'll reach the backyard. My mom likes to air dry her clothes outside, so she uses this door often because it's closer to the laundry room. Anyway, I'm laying on my old bed and my mom passes through with a load of damp laundry. She exits. I see her shadow pass by the window, and I hear her flip-flops flapping against the pavement outside, getting farther away as she makes her way to the clothesline in the backyard to hang her clothes. After a few moments, I'm half asleep when I feel my mom come back inside. And as she reaches my bedroom door that leads to the rest of the house, I ask her to turn off the light, since the light switch was right by the door. My eyes were still closed, but I feel her stop by the light switch, thinking she's going to turn it off. But the light stays on. I open my eyes slightly as I start to say again, "Mom, can you please turn off the..." But instead of my mom, I see a tall, dark figure. It doesn't have a defined shape. It just seemed like a shadow in the shape of a person. When I realized that that is definitely not my mother, I freaked. I was in shock. I couldn't move. I had my eyes wide open, terrified, just looking at this figure standing by the doorway, and it seemed to be looking in my direction. When it noticed me looking at it, it flew over me. I saw this black cloud just fly above my face and through the wall behind me. I'm hyperventilating at this point, and that's when I hear my mom's footsteps flapping back this way. She walks in and sees me having a full-blown panic attack. She hugs me, and I tell her that I was just having a bad dream. I didn't want her to worry about me or think that I was crazy. If I told her that the shadow figure was in her house, or lecture me about not going to church enough. This was by far the scariest sleep paralysis episode I have ever experienced, and it sticks out because it felt so real. It happened about 5 years ago, but it still makes me question my reality every time I think about it. I consider myself a skeptic with an open mind. I like to analyze things and find a scientific explanation to things. But I do think there are some things that just cannot be explained. I'm not a big believer in the supernatural, nor do I subscribe to any formal religion, even though I was raised Catholic. But those few times that my sleep paralysis gets really bad, and none of my calming techniques have worked, I pray. And that doesn't always work at snapping me out of it, but it doesn't hurt to try just in case it is something more sinister. If anyone has any advice to help with sleep paralysis, I'm all ears. Thank you. I'm using an alt account because this is a very personal experience, and something my sister and I have only ever told one person. This happened in Central Florida on January 23rd of 2024. To preface, my brother passed away from a suicide, and a month later, we had this experience. It's about 5 a.m., and we're in my car. Directly in front of us is mostly just a large lot that is well-kept grass and one shed. In the middle of the lot, my sister notices this girl with strawberry blonde hair. We can only see the back of her, but we notice that her feet aren't touching the ground. We were so confused. I was also looking for a light source because it was as if she was standing underneath a streetlight. She had what I would call a glow. She was no more than 50 yards away. I put my high beams on and she didn't flinch. Of course, my brain is doing mental gymnastics. What or who is this? And that's when we saw it. It is what I refer to this shadow being because it tried to appear as a person, but it wasn't. Its back was kind of hunched. It took long strides and short strides that didn't make sense. It tried to hide behind a pole, peeking its head every so often out. The shadow being was all black. I've never seen anything like it before. No distinguishable features, only black. And it was bipedal. If I could go back in time, I would have recorded it, but honestly my brain just couldn't comprehend what we were seeing. I was in awe. If anyone has any insights, or if I should cross-post this, I would really appreciate it. The OP added an edit, adding some more info due to the questions. Honestly, we watched all of this for 3 to 5 minutes. We were parked in our car getting ready to leave for work. We said a prayer and my sister watched as I backed out. The girl never moved. As far as we know, the shadow being didn't follow us. We were extremely scared, and just chose to get the heck out of there. My friend sent me an insane text out of nowhere. If you look at my post history, you'll see that I'm into the paranormal, but I'm not crazy. I browse this Reddit, the paranormal subreddit, and the UFO Reddit, but I have a degree in biochemistry. I had something happen off K10 in Kansas in 2012. I saw a giant UAP, which basically cemented to me that no one knows what's going on, and UAP humanoids are real. Anyways, my friend, who is ex-military, and was honorably discharged, and has been in combat, sent me an insane text yesterday morning. I'm going to post it verbatim. Bro, I'm not sure what the hell I just saw, but it's not something I've ever seen before anywhere. Not in real life, TV, games, or anything. I was walking my pet dog, and we were down by the tree line behind the trailer park between K10 and the trailer park on 31st in Iowa at 4:30 a.m., and the dog just stopped dead in his tracks and started barking at the sky. I looked up, and there was something floating about 50 feet above us. The closest thing I can relate it to is something shaped like a human with massive wings and glowing eyes. I pulled my phone out, and it shot straight up and disappeared. My freaking heart is pounding right now. He sent me the text right after it happened. The closest description he gave was that of the classical Mothman trope. Tropes, like Mothman, are just sensationalized ways of categorizing people's real unexplained experiences, in my opinion, but they're useful because they help categorize people's experiences. My friend knows that I'm open-minded, hence why he reached out to me first. The OP then added a comment with more information. But yeah, a more detailed description. Classic Mothman-type humanoid. It was massive, and in shadow because the moon was behind it. He said it had a weird blue aura or glow. He said when he first looked up, he hadn't even noticed it because it was silently hovering above the trees 50 feet up. He said that its eyes glowed a deep blue. Blue is not a color found in nature generally. It was massive. It had a wingspan of 30 feet and was at least 10 feet tall. He said it was thick, like a bear, almost. It was wearing a black robe akin to a Grim Reaper robe. It had a flat humanoid head with flat, non-distinct nose and mouth and no obvious ears. He said that when they made eye contact and the dog started barking, it looked confused or scared, and then let out a slight gasp as it used its wings to immediately shoot up and away at an insane speed. The fact that it hovered and was able to immediately shoot up and away at the speed that he described is what has me the most confounded. That, and the fact that it had a slight aura, makes me think that it does not fly by purely mechanical means of its wings, especially since he said that it was damn near silent when it flew off. He said it could have easily just crushed them by landing on them if it wanted to. He said the dog is constantly looking up at the sky on their walks now. It has to be seriously affected to alter its behavior, because it's a rambunctious 2-year-old untrained pit bull. Additionally, about 4 months ago, he had another experience in the same area behind his trailer park. He heard someone screaming behind his house out in the woods. He went out back and yelled out and heard someone scream, "Help me." He then saw what looked like a phone flashlight, and then it turned off and then silence. He said that he thought it was some kids pranking him or something, but he was creeped out and didn't go to check it out, because it was nighttime both times. He didn't necessarily chalk it up to anything paranormal at all when he told me the story, but I definitely assumed the worst, because I've trolled these Reddits forever, and I've heard of anecdotes that sound straight out of a horror movie. This happened some months ago, specifically on the 5th of November. I live in northern Italy, so that was the evening in which the red aurora borealis appeared visible for us. I was chilling at home after a long day when one of my friends calls me and asked me if I wanted to try to go see the aurora with him. I said sure, because I'm always up for an adventure. And where I live, the top of the mountain is only an hour in the car. At 21:30-ish, he comes and gets me, and up we go. We even see a cute, chunky fox while ascending. We arrive at the top of the mountain. There's a big parking lot there, and we get out of the car. It's pretty cold with wind howling. We encountered only one car on the road, and one is parked at a distance from us. Apparently empty or just dark. We take some pictures. Can't really see the aurora, but just some reddish specks of light here and there. Still magical. We can, however, see the beautiful Milky Way. So, despite the cold, we just stand there in admiration of the universe above us, chatting lightly. After 40 minutes to an hour, I start to feel uneasy. Not really with a reason. And then my friend goes to pee a short distance and remains in sight, and I concentrate on the surroundings as I'm used to giving credits to my internal voice. So, I suddenly start picking up on something. I hear footsteps. Every time the wind goes down, they go silent, but a bit delayed. I can clearly distinguish them as the iced snow crunched under the weight when the wind picks up in strength. I tell my friend when he comes back, and we listen. And he confirms it as they're getting progressively closer. We made eye contact, decided that we'd seen enough of the stars, and didn't want to stick around to find out. We calmly walked to the car, locked the doors, and booked it swiftly out of there. We kept checking the next day about robberies, etc., but didn't hear anything. I'm still amazed and spooked at how sudden a very calm, peaceful, and overall nice night almost resulted in a dangerous encounter. But a biped trying to sneak up on you doesn't seem friendly. Some background info. I am from Madrid, Spain. My family is from a small mountain city. We're all familiar with mountains. Even though I live in Madrid, I always go to hike in the mountain range surrounding Madrid. I would not consider us to be very superstitious and/or believe strongly in supernatural events, although I am a huge fan of folklore. This story happened in the summer. Back when I was 14 years old, my mother took me and my brother for a week-long trip to a mountain range in the southeast of Spain, close to the old town of Rio Parviejo. We had already spent half the week going on multiple hikes, and we visited beautiful lakes where me and my brother would swim, despite them being super cold. Overall, we had already had a lot of fun and we were enjoying our small family trip so far. One day, while it was very sunny and warm, we went on a hike again to this kind of abandoned trail, which some of the locals of the village had recommended. It was not accessible by car, and there was no phone service. We could not care less, since we loved to spend time in nature and we would spend our time walking and talking instead of being on our phones. We found a crystal clear lake with beautiful turquoise greenish water and lots of water vegetation in it. My brother and I immediately jumped in, and afterwards we had a picnic for lunch. So far, so good. Suddenly, while we were enjoying our bocadillo de jamón, we heard a loud scream. It was very high-pitched, and just overall scary. Considering the fact that we were next to the lake, in a small valley between tall mountains, we could hear it kind of echo. All three of us immediately looked at each other startled. We were certainly not imagining anything. From what we could deduce, the sound came from the other side of the lake, in a very bushy area. The lake itself was not very big, and we decided to make our way around it to investigate. Because although we had not seen anyone during the entire day out there, maybe someone was in danger, or needed help. I cannot really specify what the screams sounded like. In hindsight, it was not your typical scream for help, but who knows what humans are capable of sounding like when they're in dire need of help, right? After a 20-minute walk, we were already getting to the entrance of the bushy area at the other side of the lake. All three of us approaching with our walking sticks in hand, and in a cautious position. The first thing we noticed was an awful smell of rotting flesh. That, together with the scream earlier, made us feel a sense of dread. Normally you would feel welcome when helping someone out, but we did not feel welcome at all in this place. My instincts were telling me that we should just backtrack our way out of there, while not losing sight of the bushy area. However, we could not shake the feeling we had to help if someone needed it. So, we decided to proceed slowly. The joy and laughter we had at the other side of the lake were no more, whatever was going on at this side of the lake, it felt wrong and ominous. I cannot talk on my brother or mother's behalf, but the hair on my arms stood on end. After making our way through the bush for 10 minutes, we were finally reaching a clearing. During this whole time, the sense of dread had continued and the awful smell of rotting flesh had only increased. Finally, in the middle of the clearing, we saw what caused this smell. In what seemed to be the perfect middle of this small clearing, we found the dead corpse of a deer. Or at least what remained of it. The limbs were removed, and the head was half-eaten. The thing is, the cadaver looked fairly fresh, as if it was killed that same day. However, the smell was still that of a rotting and decayed corpse. It did not make any sense. We checked for footprints or dung in the clearing, but did not find anything. A logical explanation would be wolves, or even bears, since we get both of them in rural Spain. However, the missing footprints and the way of how this deer was torn apart makes it seem almost unnatural. After we checked the surroundings, we left as quickly as possible. On our way back, we did not stop to rest at the lake, or anything. We just wanted to get out of there as quickly as possible. When we were leaving the valley behind us, halfway up one of the surrounding mountains, we heard another scream, similar to the first one. However, this time we did not feel the urgency to check if someone needed help. Instead, we paced up our speed and did not go back. Somewhere in the evening, when we finally had made it back to our village, we went for dinner at a small old bar in the picturesque town square. We talked to some of the elder people from the village about our experience with their abandoned trail. They told us that, apparently, we had somehow taken a wrong turn on the trail, since it was not very clear, and that this was the reason we ended up at the valley with the lake. They also told us that a few centuries back, during the Spanish Inquisition, the local townspeople had gone to that valley because of a so-called witch that lived there and set her house on fire, killing the poor woman. Since then, the locals never hike close to the lake or its surroundings in the valley. A couple of days later, we left to go back home, but we've never been able to shake the feeling of dread we experienced that day. Again, we are not superstitious, or big believers of the supernatural, but what happened on that day was definitely weird. Over 10 years ago, I was in my 20s, sharing a townhouse with my partner. We were an end unit, connected only on the right side of the home to the rest of the houses. We lived there for at least a year, maybe 2 when this happened. And during that time, never once heard a single sound coming from our neighbors who shared the other side of our wall. One night, probably 2 or 3 a.m., I woke up to the sound of our neighbor coughing. I immediately recognized how odd that was because we had never heard them at all through the wall. The coughing continued non-stop and appeared to get louder to the point where it no longer seemed to be coming from our neighbor, but now inside my bedroom. Like the origin of the sound had drifted through the wall towards me. The sound continued to drift toward me, and I had started to breathe very heavily, like I was scared out of my mind. As it came to me and settled what felt like 2 feet directly over me. The sound kind of morphed into a mechanical sound, very similar to a scene from The Matrix, where Neo's scream becomes synthesized. This crescendoed above me and then suddenly stopped. My partner then woke up, not from the sound, but the feeling of me panicking and breathing heavily. I told her what had happened, and she said something like, "Definitely just a weird dream, half a week's sleep thing, but you do seem really scared." We tried to go back to sleep, but within a few minutes, the whole experience happened again. Only this time, my partner could hear it all too, and we were silently gripping on to each other very tightly as it was happening. Now with both of us panicking. I don't know why we didn't say anything or get out of bed, but we both had a we need to stay quiet and not draw attention to ourselves kind of feeling. It happened the same as before, and when it was done, we both turned on our bedside lights and spent the rest of the night awake watching TV. I've never heard someone else have this kind of experience. The thought of posting this here is to see if it rings true for anyone out there. So, this happened when I was about 9 or something. I'm not completely sure. My friend and I were playing in my room with Barbies, but took a quick break when she had to pee. I decided it would be fun to hide behind my door to scare her. When I stood up and wanted to hide behind my door, I saw some sort of creature. I always thought of it as some sort of alien, but it could be something else. It for sure did not look human, though. I don't know how it looked exactly, but have a vague memory of how it looked. This is because it's been such a long time. When I saw it, I felt intense fear. I could not move or breathe, and my heart was going crazy. I don't know for how long I stood there, but eventually I walked out of my room, and my friend came out of the bathroom. We both went inside my room and went to play again. At that moment, I didn't remember what happened, but still felt extremely scared. I must have looked scared too, because she kept asking me if I was okay. I'm not sure when, but maybe a few days or weeks later, I started to remember what happened that day, and got extremely scared to sleep. I never told my parents and kept it to myself. They just had to deal with me being scared. I told my little brother a few years after it happened, but every time I talked about it, or every time he would joke about it because he didn't believe me, I would freak out, and this intense fear would fill up my body. The picture of it standing there, and the fear that I felt stayed with me. I recently talked about it with my oldest brother because my younger one brought it up as a joke. My oldest brother really believes it could have been an alien of some sort, since he also believes that he saw one when he was younger. Does anyone have the same experience, or any idea what this could have been? I'm also planning to ask my younger brother if he remembers me telling him any details about how it looked. I have an odd kind of luck. My mom, a person who doesn't believe in luck, pointed out that if there's luck, that there would be an opposite force of unluck. My luck seems odd. I'm in high school and one of my classes is drama. Drama is a stressful class, and I'm pretty sure I might have undiagnosed ADHD, so the moment I realized how stressful it is to try to memorize in 10 minutes, I began to wish that there would be some way to get out of class, without being out of class. I get there and one other person shows up, so the teacher points out that we can't do our monologues due to it being unfair to us, and those out of class. This felt fairly normal at the time, because students ditch classes all the time. And then came recently, I'd been worried because we needed to block out some duo scenes. Blocking is adding in movements to movementless scenes. My teacher has talked about when he might miss class, and was always right and wouldn't just vanish. I got to class, saw my classmates sitting outside the door to the auditorium. We were waiting for him to open the door, because he would sometimes forget to open the door for a few minutes. Apparently a security guard saw us, and assumed we were ditching. He got someone who apparently had power who kept making snide remarks to us, ditching, took us to her office, found out that we were not ditching, and then complained that we were using our phones, but then gave me some compliment about not using mine. I only don't because of adults like her. She then checked if he was there. He wasn't, and he hadn't told anyone. In other words, whenever I get worried about drama, it ends with this luck. It hasn't affected any other classes, or really any other thing in my life. I'm not sure what category this fits, but here goes. About 8 years ago, I worked in the pediatric department for a hospital clinic as a medical assistant. Basically, my job consisted of bringing the patients back, taking their measurements, weight, oxygen, etc. I had a student shadowing me at the time, and I had taught her how to do everything required for rooming the patient. Because this clinic had a high volume of patients, to speed up the process, I had her do all the hands-on stuff with the baby. Weight, temperature, etc. And I would ask the mom all the questions and would document them on the computer. One day, a mom came in with her baby boy. As normal, he had his weight, length, and other vitals taken by the students shadowing me, and I asked mom all the questions pertaining to the baby's health. The student was listening to the baby's heart rate, while I was documenting the information mom had just relayed from the last question, when I suddenly heard, "Hello?" Now, the moment I heard hello, I couldn't help but think, what the hell is she, the mom, doing? It was a whiny sort of voice that sounded like a 3-year-old saying hello, and not a grown woman. Also, why is the mom out of the blue saying hello for? I turned to look at the mom who had just been talking to her baby, and both the students and mom, and myself, just kind of looked at one another in an awkward silence, until the student said to the mom, "Your baby just said hello." The mom looks at her baby and says, "Well, he's never done that before," and chuckles. In all the years I worked in peds and healthcare, I never experienced this, nor heard of a baby being able to clearly enunciate hello, especially not at 21 days old. If the student had not mentioned that she heard and saw the baby say hello, there is no way I would have ever have believed I actually heard that. So that, my friends, was a collection of some strange and scary stories. Strange and scary stories. As in strange stories and scary stories. Not necessarily that all of them are strange, not necessarily that all of them are scary, but it is strange and scary. Some of them both, none of them none. Some of them all, some of them one, some of them both. Not all of them none? Mouth words. Anyways, that was a collection of some strange and scary stories, and I do hope that you enjoyed this collection. I did. There was one in particular, they were all really good. I really enjoyed all these stories, but there was one in particular that kind of hit home for me because it mentioned Lawrence, Kansas, and K10. And I don't live too far from K10. I don't live in Lawrence. I live, north of Lawrence in a more populated area, but I know exactly where that location is. And whenever I get stories where it's like, hey, this happened in Lawrence, Kansas, or I had one that was like, this happened in Overland Park, Kansas, I'm like, oh, I know exactly where this story happened. Hopefully it's not so terrifying that I can no longer go to the south or to the east. But it does. I mean, it doesn't stop me, but it's just like, to read a story about some strange UAP humanoid thing flying around in Lawrence, Kansas, I don't know, it doesn't make me want to go back to Lawrence. Granted, I love Lawrence, and I don't know if it's still open, but the Granada is a fantastic music venue. I saw some good bands there. I saw Bad Religion there, of all bands. Fantastic show. It was them, Ballyhoo, and someone else. I saw Authority Zero there several times. Twice, 2-3 times. I think that's where we saw Watsky? I don't know. What I'm saying is, the Granada is a great place, and now I'm like, man, there could be some weird demonic thing flying around over the Granada, and I wouldn't know it, and it would be bothersome. Anyways, fantastic stories. I'm just saying, like, it's weird to hear stories about, like, not your hometown, but, like, I guess your home turf, if that makes sense. Like, OP and Lawrence, I know both those areas very well. Very well. Been to both parts of Kansas a lot, so. Anyways, yeah, good stories. Hopefully you all enjoyed them. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button. That'd be greatly appreciated. If you're new to the channel and liked what you heard, consider subscribing. That's also appreciated. And if you're feeling bold, you can go down below the video where the comment section is. Leave me a comment. Let me know how you're doing, how your day's going, how your week is going, what you have planned for the weekend. And yeah. And of course, you know, if you have any experiences like these or anything like scary, or to some extent like scary funny, like the Eatser Bunny story recently, that one was scary funny, right? It was terrifying to be in that situation, but you gotta laugh at it. Send those to me. astheravendreams.com. Click the button to send it my way. It's right in the center of the screen. You can also do a super thanks, which is a tip to the channel, which is never expected but always appreciated. Or join Patreon or memberships, get early access to content like this. I try to get stuff up as early as possible. This video, will be up 24 hours prior to it going live for the public, so everyone who is a member or patron will be able to listen to it Thursday night instead of Friday night. Yeah. There's also other stuff on Patreon if you sign up for it. Some good stuff. Yeah. I don't really have anything else to say, so I hope you're all having a beautiful day. Hope I see you again here very soon, but until then, remember, you are loved, you are valid, you are important, you are the best you that you can be. Do not forget it. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And until I see you again, my friends, much love, and sleep well.